Hello and welcome to the Best Practices in TestRail Reporting webinar. I'm the TestRail Product Manager, Simon Knight, and also with me on the webinar today is Jacob Scott, one of our TestRail support engineers, who you'll recognize from several of our previous webinars as well, I'm sure.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Jacob. During the webinar today, we're going to be talking about all things related to TestRail reporting. So we're going to start off by taking a brief tour of the TestRail dashboards, and then we'll take a more in-depth look at the out-of-the-box TestRail reports, covering off what's available in those and how to best configure them so that you get the most out of them. And then to finish off with, we will talk a little bit about how you can create your own custom reports for TestRail using either the TestRail API, or if you're a server customer, using a custom reporting plugin. So without further ado, hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A as well. But let's get into things properly. So if you're already a TestRail user, probably you'll already appreciate to some extent that TestRail has a wide variety of reports and dashboards available, including various real-time reporting displays, the dashboards, that you can see by navigating through the various TestRail screens. The test reports themselves are also configurable with various options that you may or may not have thought to explore during your day-to-day testing work. So I'm going to try and cover those areas here to help you get to know the TestRail reporting capabilities much better. But as I mentioned, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just covering off the dashboards in TestRail first, since there's quite a lot of information that you can get from those without even needing to generate a report at all. So starting off with the very first page that you'll probably come to in TestRail when you open it up, the project dashboard. And when we look at the project dashboard, we can see that activity is being reported across all of the projects that are actually visible to you. Some may not be, depending on the roles and permissions of the user that you've logged into TestRail with. But whatever role or permissions you've got, the likelihood is that you've got access to at least one project, and therefore you're going to see a project activity chart at the top of this page, showing some sense of where you are in terms of testing for that project, the test changes that have been carried out in that project specifically. And for all charts of this type, you can change the time frame that you're actually looking at as well by clicking on the time link and just adjusting it like so. Now, for demonstration purposes, I've just set up a couple of example projects in here, and they're both using much the same data, so there's quite a strong correlation between the activity lines here. And if I go back much further than 14 days, I'm going to see that activity start to flatline. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'll probably just keep that to 14 days there. So you got your activity chart, and I guess one other thing to mention in terms of the dashboard that's fairly useful is if you expand your project views here, then you also get a high level view of your progress at milestone level for each of those projects. And if you hover over the graph, then you can see a breakdown of how that's been generated. So you've got your 42% of passed tests there, 8% blocked, 37% untested, 42% complete in total. So that can be fairly useful as well. But if you drill down into the project itself, so let's take this one, then we can see much the same kind of activity summary at the top of the project overview page. And as I mentioned before, you can adjust that by clicking on the time link. Further down the page, we can see all of the milestones and the test runs that are included within that project. And we can also see a summary of the activities that have been taking place in the project. And again, all of this is very much at a high level. So you can see a history of what's happening with your test runs and your milestones. And if you click over to test changes, then you can see much the same kind of thing for your actual test cases as well. Status changes, comments, assignments, and the like. Once you drill down into your test runs view, you're going to see a list of all the test runs or plans created for that project, split out by whether they're open or whether they're closed. At this level, so long as the test run is still open, you'll be able to see your progress bar indicating whereabouts you are with that specific run or plan. And if you hover over the graph, then you get to see a more detailed breakdown as I showed you on the project's dashboard. And if the test run is closed, then you just see a percentage breakdown of the number of passing tests. If we drill down even further into a test plan, then you get to see a larger view of your progress in the displayed pie chart. Again, hovering over the sections gives you a bit of a breakdown as to how they've been calculated. And any of your statuses will appear to the right of the pie chart, and that would include any custom statuses that you've created as well. So here we've just got the out-of-the-box statuses in my example project that I've created. But if you've gone into your customizations area and created some additional statuses, then you'd be able to see that in here as well. If we drill down even further into a specific run, you get much the same kind of view, but instead of runs, you get to see all of the tests that are actually included in the run with their associated statuses. By default, your tests are going to be sorted by section, which provides a little bit of additional functionality that a lot of our users aren't really aware of. Namely that in addition to displaying this little graph here showing you the status of the tests in that section, if you hover over the graph, then again you get to see that breakdown, which is kind of neat, I think. So anytime that you're actually looking at an entity in TestRail like this, a test run or a milestone or a plan or a test case, if you move across to the right-hand bar, then there's a bunch of additional data that is available in the form of the activity, progress, and defects views. So we've got the activity chart in there, all of the activity across my test cases. Progress with my burn down chart showing me an estimate of how long it's going to take me to finish all of the testing for this run based on the current progress, and defects, all of the defects that are associated with the entity, again in this case a run, along with their IDs, their statuses in TestRail, and their statuses in my integrated defect management tool pulled from that tool in real time. So the statuses you see in TestRail are the same status as you would see in Jira, for example, or whatever other tool you've got integrated, assembler as another example. So I find these views really handy. Just to mention as well that if you look at a specific test case, you'll see something slightly different. So you see tests and results in addition to your activity, progress, and defect information in there. By way of an example, as a product manager, I really like to look at things at milestone level because it gives me a sense of where we are with a complete release. And again, if I navigate into one of my milestones, then I can see, you know, my overall status across all of the runs or plans that have been associated with that milestone. But I can also drill down to my activity. I can see the same burn down chart but applied to all of the runs and plans for that milestone. So in effect, it's telling me how long it's going to take to complete all of the testing for my release, which is pretty cool. And I can see all of the defects that are associated with my release as well. So that's pretty handy. And just a final thing to mention on the dashboards front is from a reporting perspective, many of those views. So let's drill down to a plan again, for example. Those views have a print button. What that enables you to do is basically generate a report at the level of that entity without any further configuration whatsoever. So if I click on this, that's going to generate me a report for my testing for all of the runs and tests in that entire plan. So, you know, clearly that's at plan level. So that's quite a substantial report as things currently stand. If you wanted to, this is the kind of high level version of the report. You can go even further and print out a detailed version of that report if you wanted to. I don't want to do that at plan level. I might want to do that at run level. So let's go and take a look at what that looks like. I go in here, so much the same thing again. So all of my test statuses for that run. This is an outline or high level. If I drill down further, then I can see a much more detailed version of the testing for that run, including all of the steps and testing information inside of the cases, all of the status changes, the assignments, the whole shebang. And this can be done at the level of your test cases as well. So if you ever find yourself needing to just dump all of your test cases out into a report, then you can do that at test case title level or outline level, or you can print out the whole lot with all of the associated information. So again, that's pretty handy and something that you may not have been aware of. Okay. So where are we? Let me just navigate back to my slides here. Okay, that's pretty much it for the dashboards. I just wanted to give you a real brief overview of those. Key things to take away from your dashboards are they provide you with real-time information about the status of your testing. So if you want to know what's happening with your testing right now, your dashboards are the place to go. All of the top level entities provide additional data about activity, progress, and defects across your testing. So those tabs are always available to you in your milestones, plans, runs, and also at test and test case level as well. And all of the dashboards have got outline and detailed reporting capability without any additional configuration whatsoever. So again, pretty handy stuff. All right, getting into the reports proper. So let's go take a look at the reports page itself. The first thing you're going to see when you look at your reports page is that it's dependent on what reports you've got in there and your role and permissions, etc. Is that it's split out into 4 sections. So you've got your shared, your private, your scheduled, and your API template sections. Shared reports, as you might imagine, are reports that when they were configured were set to be accessible to everybody. Private reports are reports that were configured only to be available to you at the point of execution. Scheduled reports displays reports that have been configured to run at specific times. And since TestRail 5.7, we've got the API template section. So your report is going to appear in this section if you have configured it to be available on demand via the API. And what this means is that if, for example, you're following an automated approach to running your test cases, then at the end of a test run, you can just make an additional call to the API to run a report that you have pre-configured in your TestRail reports area to report on the status of your test run that you've just executed, and then email that report to interested parties. So that can be pretty handy as well. Clicking into your reports opens them up in the browser, as you would expect. Once you're in the report, you've got the option to print that out again, as we sort of talked about a little bit earlier. So you can click on the print button. You can also email out your report to the users in your TestRail instance, or by adding email addresses. And you can also download your report as HTML or PDF format. All of your previously generated reports, whoops, let's try and get back in there, are available on the reports overview page. And depending on your permissions, etc., you'll be able to delete those if you need to. For scheduled and API template reports, you've also got the option of going into those reports and modifying the report configuration so that it gets sent out to different people, or reports on additional runs, or whatever you want to do. So if we take a look at some of these out of the box report formats in detail, you always have the option of hovering over those reports to get a little bit of a tooltip about what each one does. So we're going to drill down into a few of these. Unfortunately, due to time limitations, we're not going to be able to go into lots of detail about each one of these reports. So what I've done is chosen a few of them just to give you an idea of the different kinds of reports that are available, and how best kind of an overview of how the report configuration actually works, so that you've got the knowledge and power to customize each of these reports according to the report type and your specific needs to give you the best information possible. So let's start off with runs summary. So whenever you go into a report, what you're going to see is that they all have a pretty standard layout. So you're always going to see the same kind of details at the top of your report configuration view. You've got the capability to add your report name, and you can utilize the date or date time variables in there as well, should you wish. And you've obviously got the option to add a description in which you can add links to any supplemental resources or describe what it is that the report is intended to convey. So I guess by way of a pro tip, what we might say is, use a descriptive name for all of your reports, so that when you go into your reporting area, you can easily find the report that you're looking for, and so that other people going into that area can easily see what the report is about. Each report type has got a report options section. So this is where we're really getting into the meat of the reporting configuration. And this area is what's going to allow you to configure the content of the various sections of your report. So for the runs summary report and for many other reports, I've got the option to choose all of my test runs or to filter them. To apply a filter to my report, then I can open up the filter and the dialog and get access to all of the filtering mechanisms that are available whenever I'm looking at my test cases. So you'll probably recognize these filtering options from your test cases or your test run views. So if I just want to see what happened during a specific period, for example, I can filter according to runs that were completed over the last week, or whatever other period I specify. I can also filter by runs that have been assigned to a specific person. So, let's go with runs that were completed by Bart Simpson in the last week. And then I'm going to need to change my radio button so that it actually uses that filter. And I can filter by specific runs using the run filter as well below. So again, I've got my filtering options in there, and I've got the ability to use the checkboxes to decide what specific runs I want to add in there. Okay, let's come out of that. And you can further limit the number of test runs included in your report using the maximum number of test runs using the maximum number of runs drop down. So that can be useful as well. Depending on how many runs you've got, you may have a sense of what the best value is to use in here. And if you haven't got a whole load of runs, using all may be the best option for you. I'm just going to leave that as it is for the time being. So the details tab allows you to control which sections actually appear in your report. And a good rule of thumb for generating your report is to keep them high level and to uncheck the tests and test results checkbox unless you really want to see the results of all of your tests line by line in your reports. And you've got some other options here as well, so you can choose whether to include the progress and the burn down chart. Basically, you can choose whether to see the activity chart, and whether you want to see the status chart and the test statistics as well. So you can control the content of your report on the details tab, which sections are going to appear in your report once it's been generated, basically. And you've also got this this checkbox down here that allows you to control whether or not to include links in your report as well. On the activity tab, you can set the time frame for your report. So we've already done that to some extent by applying a filter on the test runs tab. But if you hadn't done that, you would also be able to use the drop down here to specify a time frame. In fact, I believe that's actually pulling it from the filter here anyway. So you can use the activity tab to set the time frame and the status metrics if you want to, but this only applies to the activity section of the report. So if you've chosen to include the activity section in your generated report, then the activity tab is going to control what content you actually see in that section. And again, you can set the maximum number of activities by using the maximum number drop down, and you can also apply some filtering to the statuses that you're interested in. So, for example, if you only care about what's failed, then you could apply the failed filter. So we'll do that on this report. Okay, so we've also got our tests tab in here as well, which again allows us to apply some further filtering if we want to for the tests. And we can define what columns we want to appear on the report as well, and the maximum number of tests. So I think I've covered most of the report options. The access and scheduling area on your report configuration view is going to be fairly self-explanatory. You can define whether it's accessible only to yourself or to everybody, when to create the report. So if you want to generate it right now, or make it available via the API, or set the report to be run on a schedule, again, defined by yourself, and whether or not you want to share the report via email, and if you do want to share it, whether you want to send it out as an HTML attachment or as a PDF. So we are gonna run this report right now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. And that might just take a few moments to. So when you view a report, a lot of the information you see is going to be familiar from the various dashboard views that we saw earlier, but it's going to be further refined by the timeframes and the filters that we've actually applied to the report. So we can see things like the overall statuses of tests across the test runs that have been included within the report. We can also see the information about how the statuses correlate with the specific runs. So we're only showing failed statuses here. So what I'm getting from this is all of the failed cases from all of the runs in the scope of the report. And if I look at one of these cases, then I can see, for example, this one has failed twice across 9 runs in total, giving it an overall failure rate of 22%. And likewise, these ones, 1 failure out of 9 runs, so an 11% failure rate. Probably isn't the best report to demonstrate some of this stuff. Let's try and generate a run summary again, but with less of a constraint on the filter. We'll include everything. Let's just run that quickly. And hopefully that'll give us a little bit more to play with on the report itself. Okay, so there we go. So as I mentioned, a lot of the information is going to be fairly familiar from your dashboard view. We can see all of the runs included in the report, along with any milestone relationships and the percentage complete by pass status on the far right hand side of the report. So this is let's go back here, go back into the run itself. So at the top of the page, we've got the status and test statistics. So that's kind of this stuff here. And then we've got our activity section, which correlates to this section here and this tab here. And we can see that just includes the activity for the tests in the scope of the report. So the activity across all of these runs, basically, and plans if there's any in there. So that's the sorry. So actually, the status and test statistics is this bit. The activity section is kind of up here. Yeah, and then we've got the progress section with our burn down here, along with any forecasts and estimates. And then we've got all of our tests and results at the bottom of the report there. So you can kind of see how that report is made up of all of these different areas. And as I mentioned, you can control whether or not those areas appear in your report by selecting the appropriate checkbox. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a good sense of how the report options section can be used to control the content of your report. So just to touch on a few of the other reports that we think are really useful, and I just want to kind of touch on during the webinar, since as I mentioned, we can't cover all of the reports in detail. So we've got comparison for cases. I generated one of these, yes I have. So the comparison for cases report is really good for comparing results across multiple test runs. So we can take a quick look at that and see how that looks in this one that I prepared earlier. So at the top of the report, you get to see a summary view of the statuses for each test run. And then underneath, you can see each in-scope run along with its milestones and the overall status, as we sort of talked about previously. Where this report differs a little bit is in providing you with kind of a view of the life cycle of your test cases across the different runs. So these are the runs in the scope of the report, and this is a high level summary of the various result statuses across each of those runs, and obviously the percentages and metrics and all that stuff as well. And then you get a breakdown for all of your tests and associated statuses that were included in those runs. So you can see how a particular test performed across each of the runs in the scope of the report. So that can be a useful report if you want to gauge the results of your tests over time. What else? Property distribution. So property distribution can be useful if you want to compare entities that have got multiple options. So let's take a look at, again, one that in true Blue Peter style I prepared earlier. So when you configure your property distribution report, you've got a grouping tab. So that's how this one differs, and it allows you to choose how you want, what option you want to use to group your tests with. So for my example, I've chosen to group my tests by who those tests were assigned to, so that I can see for each assignee how they tested, basically what result they assigned to that test case. So most often we see teams using this to get kind of an overview of their test statuses, but you can use this, like I say, as I've done to see who did what to group your tests by user. But the other really useful use case for this report is to group by status as well. So status types. Oh, let's open that up in there. Lots of teams want to see which tests are failing most often, and this report can be used for that purpose. So when you're configuring the report, you can use the statuses and results tab to define which statuses you want to see and whether to include all the results, the latest results, or both. And in my example, I've just opted for the failing test results across my active milestones. So when I view the report, I can see the total number of failures across all of those milestones in graph form at the top of the report. So I can see there was 68 failures across all of the milestones in the scope of the report. The test runs that were actually included in the scope of the report. So again, because I chose active milestones, it would be all of the runs that were associated with the milestones that were active at the point that the report was generated, along with all of the usual metrics, and the tests that failed, along with the counts and percentages and how many runs they were actually used in, as we saw previously. So that's pretty handy. And there was one other report that I wanted to talk about, but I don't think I had an opportunity to set up, and I'm probably not going to be able to now, which was the coverage for references report, which basically allows me to see what the test coverage situation is for a feature or a group of features. And I can use this report to basically tell me what my coverage looks like for references by plugging those references into the report configuration. So I can either generate that across all references, or I can supply a specific reference, or say like an epic that's linked to a bunch of stories, for example. I might choose to put the references to the stories and the epic in there. And then it's going to generate me a coverage report. So actually I can just use all references, and that'll give us a little bit of a sense of what that might look like. Just wait a few moments for that to finish. Here we go. So this is going to give me an overview of the coverage metrics, showing me as a percentage how many of my features have been covered by tests in TestRail. So we can see I've got 38 references in total. I've got 81 cases with references, so 81 cases that actually reference one or more of these 38 references, and I've got 149 cases that don't reference any of these references at all. And then I'm able to see all of the references and the case coverage for those references. So DH1 has 2 cases covering it, DH3 has 4 cases covering it, etc., etc. And I'm able to see all of the test cases without references as well. So if I need to find out what my requirements coverage looks like, then this is a report that's going to help me to do that. Okay, let's go back to my slides. So there's a few little sort of pro tips in there. Use descriptive names for your reports. Use the report options to make sure you're actually filtering for the option that you want. Keep your reports relatively high level by limiting the amount of test case information that you actually supply in those reports. You know, don't overload your stakeholders with lots of information that they don't necessarily want to see. And control all of your report content on the report configuration tabs. Okay, I'm going to move on from the reports to talk about customization a little bit, because I'm conscious that we're short on time. So just in case out of the box reports aren't sufficient for your purposes, or you just need some additional flexibility, you do have the capability to create your own custom reports very quickly, well, quickly and easily with a bit of coding using the TestRail API. If you've used TestRail for any length of time, then you'll have seen the print feature for test runs and sets of test cases, which allow you to print out your test run or test suite, and I showed you that earlier. My colleague John Reynolds has created a script that we're going to use to generate a similar outline version of a test run report, which uses Python, our Python TestRail API wrapper, and a little bit of additional HTML and CSS magic to actually generate a report. So let me show you what that looks like real quickly. I'm not going to take a deep dive into the code, but basically you've got a script here that runs through a sequence of API calls to actually get all of the information from TestRail that it needs. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. Like I say, I'm not going to go into detail as to how all of that works and what it looks like. The script is available for you to go and take a look at on GitHub. We can also share that after the webinar or in our forum if you ask for it. And the API bindings are publicly available as well, so you can use Python, C#, Ruby, Java, whatever you want for those. We're using Python here just because it's quick and easy. Also in here, we've got a little bit of metadata in terms of the credentials that are being used to actually access the TestRail API. You don't need to see that. We do have a little bit of HTML header stuff just to format the HTML that is ultimately generated by this script. We've got a little bit of CSS in there as well to apply some styling to the script as well. All of this can just be grabbed out of TestRail directly. I mean, you can just go into browser tools and grab all of this stuff yourself. Some of it is included in the GitHub repository. Certainly the HTML is. I don't remember the CSS in there. I think I had to go and grab this myself, but we can make sure that's available to you as well. And this is the wrapper for the TestRail API, which again you can go and grab off of the GitHub repo. So let me just run this so you can see what this actually does. So I'm gonna hit the run button. It's gonna do a bunch of stuff, as you can see down here. I just added a bunch of print statements to the script so you can see that it's doing something. And then what we've ended up with is a sample HTML file here, which if I open up in my browser, let's do that there. So there you go, you can see it has now opened up this report, which just details the test results for the run specified in the script there. So that's one way in which you can generate custom reports, is using the API. So just quickly how that was built. So as I mentioned, you've got the header and styling for the HTML file copied from the existing print feature in TestRail, saved locally in some static files, as I showed you. The data for the report is obtained by doing a get run call used to get the run title, completed statuses and total counts of each status. Get the statuses of the tests inside of the run, the status names, IDs, color codes, etc. Get the sections that are associated with the tests, get the cases, get the tests. Basically, use the API to get all of the information that you want, and then create the HTML elements in the script itself and build the final report. Okay, so you're going to end up with something looking like this. And this is just a simple example of what you can do with the TestRail API if you want to create a custom report. And this kind of script can be extended to create a report for multiple runs, specific tests, etc., etc. And I think where this idea can become really powerful is once you've created a script that's using TestRail's API to pull a bunch of data and turn it into a report, there's nothing to stop you from looking at other tools in your DevOps process and start thinking, well, what if I pull some data from this other place, I don't know, Jira, for example, or Assembler, or your requirements tooling, or your defects tooling, or your production logging, or some scanners that you've got running as part of your build pipeline. Whatever it is that you've got going on, there are probably other API enabled tools that you can grab data from and consolidate with your TestRail test data to provide a complete end-to-end or continuous testing view of what is happening during your testing process. So I think that can be a really powerful approach to customizing your TestRail reports. If you're a server customer, there's another way that you can customize your reports. You can use a custom report plugin. So full documentation for how to do that is on our website. And you can also find some example code for a custom report plugin on GitHub. And it's linked to by the documentation on our website. So real quickly, I'm not in Python now, I'm in PHP. So what that is basically going to look like is if you go and download the sample code, which is basically what I've done here, you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff. So you've got your description file that's used to define the report, basically, in your about.json. You've got a language file with a bunch of metadata about how you want the report to be described, in effect. You've got the report.php, which is where, there it is, which is, you know, the actual implementation of the report plugin, and that contains all of your methods to render and validate the report options, as well as generating the actual reports themselves. You've got some form files in here, so these babies down here, that renders the views as forms and returns the result to TestRail. And then you've got your the main method, which again is in the report file, is this run method. So, you know, there's quite a bit of stuff going on in here. Obviously, I'm not going to go into detail about what all of this stuff is doing in this webinar because we simply don't have time. But basically, it's expected to render and return the static HTML along with a list of resources that the report is referencing. So as I mentioned on the slide, you can download that code by going to our documentation and following the link to the GitHub repository, or you can just grab these if you're quick enough. Once you've got everything set up correctly, what that is going to look like is something like this. So you're going to end up with a plugins area in your reports navigation bar, which allows you to configure and run your new report that you've created in your plugin. So this one just allows me to report on the properties across all of my tests, so the types and priorities across all of my suites and runs for a particular project. So if I go ahead and run that, once again, that might, that went straight ahead. So that's going to provide me with a bunch of a percentage breakdown of the result statuses. So down here for the different properties. So I've got the types property across all of my statuses for the runs included in the scope of that report. So I can see for all of my acceptance type tests, I had a pass rate of 53% versus a failure rate of 3%, for example. And priority wise, all of my critical tests have a 48% pass rate versus a 5% failure rate. So this is just an example plugin, you can see I haven't set it up completely correctly because it looks as though these images are broken on the left. So there's something going on there. But that just gives you an idea of what that code looks like, where to go and get it, and you know, it's available. You can go and download it from the GitHub repository and have a play around and see what you can create with that. And I think with that, we are pretty much done and more or less on the hour. So we've covered the TestRail dashboard views and the kind of information you're going to see there. How to best use the reporting configuration to get the best kind of data out of your TestRail reports. How to use the API to create custom reports, and how to use the custom report plugin capability to create custom reports if you're a server customer. And I don't think we've got time to take any questions. As I mentioned previously, you can always get in contact with us via the contact@gurup.com email address, where questions have been asked in the chat console and not answered. We will do our very best to follow up with those in a blog post or something like that after the webinar. But I think we are basically done for today. We do have another webinar tomorrow on the basics of using TestRail. So please join us for that if that's something of interest. You can find out information about all of our webinars on the gurup.com TestRail webinars page. Please do go and check that out. If you're interested in learning more and becoming like an Uber test manager, please do check out the 12 Secrets to Effective Test Management ebook here. It's really good. And yeah, go try TestRail if you haven't done so already, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thank you everybody for joining. Bye bye.